Are you ready for a story that will touch your heart? Imagine a millionaire about to fire his housekeeper, but when he calls, a desperate child answers with a secret that will turn his world upside down. Get ready for emotion, surprises, and an ending that will make you reflect on what truly matters. Stay until the end, because this is one of those stories that changes everything. A millionaire picks up the phone in his office with the firm intention of firing his housekeeper after her third consecutive unexcused absence. He dials the number, preparing for a curt speech about professional responsibility. But instead of the adult voice he expects, a tiny, desperate 6-year-old voice answers on the other end, whispering frantically, "Daddy, hello? Is that you?" Mommy won't wake up. When he asks, confused, "What's happening?" the child's response chills him to the bone. "She's not breathing right. I don't know what to do." What he discovers upon arriving at the employee's home leaves him in complete shock. James Carter adjusted the cuff of his tailored suit as he gazed out over New York City through the floor-to-ceiling window of his 40th floor office. The scent of imported leather armchairs mingled with the artificial chill of the air conditioning, creating the icy atmosphere he cherished. At 48, he'd built an empire on 3 unwavering pillars: discipline, efficiency, and zero tolerance for incompetence. His fingers tapped impatiently on the mahogany desk as he reviewed his schedule. 3 delayed meetings, 2 pending contracts, and a decision he'd been putting off for days. The HR report lay open before him, highlighting in red a name that deeply irritated him. Laura Bennett, housekeeper, 3rd consecutive unexcused absence. Unacceptable, he muttered, yanking the landline phone with a sharp motion. James didn't tolerate irresponsibility, especially from employees in basic roles. If Laura couldn't handle her simple duties, she clearly didn't deserve to stay in his company. The termination would be swift, surgical, with no room for pleas or flimsy excuses. He dialed the number from her employee file, mentally rehearsing the cold speech he'd deliver. Words about professional commitment, responsibility, and the natural consequences of poor choices. His assistant had stepped out for lunch, leaving him alone in the controlled environment where every element reflected his power and resolve. The phone rang once, twice. On the 3rd try, someone answered, "Daddy, hello? Is that you?" James furrowed his brow, confused. The voice was high-pitched, childlike, laced with an urgency that caught him off guard. He must have dialed the wrong number. He double-checked the digits, but they were correct. "No. Kid, I need to speak with Laura Bennett," he said, trying to keep his tone professional despite the odd situation. "Mister," the shaky voice trembled from the other end, "Mommy won't wake up. I tried shaking her, but she won't open her eyes." James's stomach tightened. Something in the fragility of that small voice pierced his corporate armor like a sharp blade. He stood instinctively, still gripping the phone. "What do you mean, she won't wake up? Where are you?" "At home, mister. Mommy was on the couch watching TV, and then she got real quiet. She's not breathing right. She's making a weird noise." The child began to sob softly. "I don't know what to do. Daddy left a long time ago." James felt his blood run cold. His corporate instincts were overridden by something more primal, more human. His irritation over the employee's absence morphed instantly into genuine concern for a child clearly in danger. "Listen carefully," he said, forcing calm into his voice. "What's your name?" "Emma. I'm 6 years old." "Emma, you were very brave to answer the phone. Now, I need you to tell me, is your mom breathing?" "I think so, but really slow. And she wet her pants." James was already grabbing his car keys, his pristine suit forgotten. "Emma, do you know your address?" The girl recited it with a trembling voice. James jotted it down, recognizing a working-class neighborhood in Brooklyn where some of his employees lived. It was at least a 40-minute drive in afternoon traffic. "Listen, Emma, I'm calling an ambulance, and then I'm coming to you. Can you open the door when I get there?" "I can, mister. But are you really coming? Mommy always says her boss is a very important person." James froze mid-stride in the hallway, struck by the innocence of her question. For a moment, he saw himself through the eyes of a scared child, someone powerful enough to help, but too distant to truly care. "I'm coming, Emma. Hang in there." James drove like he'd never driven in his meticulously planned life. His black Mercedes cut through traffic with urgency as he alternated between calling 911 and reassuring Emma on speakerphone. The girl's voice became his guide through uncharted territory, the raw fear for another person's life. "Mister, Mommy made that noise again," Emma said, clearly trying to be brave despite the terror in her voice. "It's okay, Emma. The ambulance is on its way. You're being so strong." James was surprised by the gentleness in his own voice, a tone his employees had never heard. When he finally reached the address, James parked in front of a sight that shocked him deeply. Laura Bennett's home was a small, weathered row house with peeling paint and a tiny front yard where a few stubborn flowers fought to survive. The contrast between his Manhattan penthouse and this reality hit him like a punch to the gut. Emma opened the door before he could knock. A tiny girl with curly hair tied back with a worn elastic, wearing an oversized t-shirt and tattered flip-flops. Her big brown eyes, wide with fear, lit up slightly when she saw him. "You really came," she whispered, as if it were a miracle. James crouched to her level, a gesture he'd never made with any child. "Of course I came. Where's your mom?" Emma led him to a cramped living room where Laura lay unconscious on a sagging couch. James vaguely recognized the woman he'd occasionally seen in his office hallways. Always quiet, always working discreetly. Now, seeing her unconscious and clearly ill, he felt an inexplicable shame for never truly noticing her as a person. The room revealed a dignified but crushing poverty. Sparse furniture, all old but clean. Through the slightly open fridge door, James saw only a few basic items. A pot on the stove held leftover rice, likely the meal Emma had tried to prepare alone. "How long has your mom been like this?" he asked, discreetly checking Laura's pulse. "Since lunchtime. She said she had a headache and was going to lie down for a bit." Emma wiped her nose on her sleeve. Then she started making weird noises and wouldn't wake up. The sound of an ambulance siren echoed down the narrow street. James felt immense relief, but also growing anxiety. What would happen to Emma while Laura received medical care? The question surprised him with its spontaneity. When had he started genuinely caring about people outside his immediate circle? The paramedics arrived quickly, professional, and efficient. After an initial assessment, they confirmed Laura needed immediate hospitalization. Unstable vitals, dangerously low blood pressure, signs of severe dehydration. "Sir, are you a relative?" one paramedic asked. I'm her employer, James," he replied, the word feeling strange on his lips. "And the kid?" James looked at Emma, who clung to his leg with the desperate trust of someone with no one else. The question hung in the air like a bomb about to shatter his carefully structured life. "Mister, are you going to stay with me?" Emma looked up, her eyes revealing a vulnerability that broke something in his chest. The ambulance waited. Laura needed urgent care. Emma needed protection. And James Carter, the man who planned every minute of his existence, faced the most impulsive decision of his life. "I will," he said, surprising himself. "I'll stay with you." At the hospital, James found himself in unfamiliar territory. Holding Emma's small, trembling hand as they waited for news about Laura was an experience that challenged decades of emotional detachment. The girl stayed glued to him, as if he were her only anchor in a storm. "Doctor, how's she doing?" James asked when a doctor finally approached the waiting room. Dr. Thompson, a middle-aged man with tired but kind eyes, checked his clipboard before responding. "Ms. Bennett is stable, but her condition is concerning. Severe dehydration, profound anemia, and signs of malnutrition. From what we've gathered, she's been hiding symptoms for weeks." Emma squeezed James's hand tighter. "Is Mommy gonna be okay?" "We'll take good care of her," the doctor replied with a reassuring smile. but she'll need to stay here a few days to regain her strength. James felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. And the child? She doesn't have other relatives? According to our records, there are no emergency contacts besides her mother's workplace. The doctor gave James a pointed look. You said you're her employer? Yes. James hesitated, realizing that simple word carried implications he hadn't considered. Laura's worked for my company for 2 years. During the conversation, Emma fell asleep in James's lap, exhausted from the day's stress. The weight of the child in his arms stirred a long-buried memory. The distant recollection of holding his own son before a bitter divorce and legal battles turned fatherly love into a wound he'd chosen to forget. Mr. Carter, the doctor said quietly to avoid waking Emma. Ms. Bennett was clearly battling this illness alone. From her condition, I suspect she's been skipping meals to ensure her daughter had enough. James felt a knot in his stomach. How many times had he seen Laura in his office hallways? Always discreet, always efficient, never suspecting the silent struggle she faced at home. Guilt began to erode his conscience like acid. Can she have visitors? Not yet. She's sedated and needs complete rest. Maybe tomorrow. James looked at Emma, sleeping peacefully despite the day's trauma. The absolute trust she'd placed in him, a stranger she knew only as her mom's boss, was both touching and terrifying. What kind of man had he become that a desperate child saw him as her savior? Back in the car, with Emma drowsy in the back seat, James faced a decision that would change everything. Taking the girl to his penthouse meant crossing a line he'd never imagined crossing. His home was his sanctuary, a meticulously organized space where nothing happened without his absolute control. Mister, Emma murmured, half asleep. Do you have food at your house? I'm hungry, but I don't want to bother you. James glanced in the rearview mirror at a child trying to be polite even in her extreme vulnerability. The upbringing Laura had managed to give her daughter, despite all her hardships, touched something deep in his hardened heart. I've got food, Emma, and you're not bothering me. As he drove through the brightly lit streets toward his upscale Manhattan neighborhood, James realized he was carrying more than a scared child. He was bringing home a mirror that would reflect every choice he'd made over the years, every missed opportunity to be truly human. His penthouse loomed imposing at the end of a tree-lined street. Emma woke fully upon seeing the majestic building, her eyes widening with awe and intimidation. James parked in the garage, realizing for the first time how overwhelmingly grand his home might seem to a small child. Emma's entry into his penthouse was like watching two realities collide in slow motion. She stood frozen in the marble foyer, her small eyes scanning the towering columns, crystal chandelier, and curved staircase that looked like something out of a movie. Her worn flip-flops clashed brutally with the polished floor that reflected every movement. Wow, she whispered, her voice echoing in the vast space. Is this where you live, mister? James observed his own home through Emma's eyes and, for the first time, saw how cold and intimidating it was. Every expensive object, every architectural detail designed to impress, suddenly felt excessive and soulless. Yeah, this is it, he replied, feeling oddly ashamed of the extravagance. You hungry? Before Emma could answer, Margaret, his housekeeper, appeared in the foyer. The 55-year-old woman, who'd worked for James for a decade, stopped short at the sight of the child. Her cordial expression shifted to thinly veiled disapproval. Mr. Carter, she said in a controlled tone, I didn't know we were expecting guests. Margaret, this is Emma. She'll be staying with us for a few days while her mother recovers in the hospital. James realized he couldn't fully explain the situation without sounding like he was justifying himself. Margaret scanned Emma from head to toe, clearly noting her simple clothes and messy hair. I see. And where will she stay? The question carried a subtext James caught immediately. Margaret wasn't just asking about logistics. She was questioning the very decision to bring an employee's daughter into his home. In the guest room on the second floor, James replied firmly, making it clear he wasn't asking for permission. Emma, sensing the tension, sidled closer to James and whispered, "Mister, if I'm in the way, I can sleep on the couch. I'm used to it." The innocence of her offer hit James like a punch to the gut. Margaret, meanwhile, looked even more uncomfortable, as if the child's humility only confirmed her biases about people like her. "You're not sleeping on a couch," James said, resting a protective hand on Emma's hair. "Let's get you a snack." In the kitchen, the scene repeated with Susan, the cook. Normally cheerful and talkative, she became oddly formal in Emma's presence. She prepared a simple sandwich, but her body language screamed disapproval. "Sir, does the girl have any food allergies I should know about?" Susan asked, as if Emma weren't there. "You can ask her directly," James replied, irritated by the condescending tone. "Emma, are you allergic to any foods?" "I don't know what allergies are," Emma answered honestly, biting into the sandwich with obvious hunger. "Mommy always said we don't waste food, so I eat everything." The silence that followed was heavy with discomfort. Susan and Margaret exchanged knowing glances, clearly interpreting Emma's response as confirmation of their assumptions about her unsuitable background. James felt growing indignation at his staff's attitudes, but also recognized he'd never shown genuine interest in his employees' personal lives. The coldness he'd always cultivated was now turning against him through others. After the snack, while Margaret reluctantly prepared the guest room, James showed Emma around the penthouse. She marveled at each room, touching objects delicately as if they were sacred relics. "Mister, do you live alone in this huge house?" "I do," James replied, hearing the echo of loneliness in his own voice for the first time. "That must be sad," Emma said with the brutal honesty of a child. "Our house is tiny, but me and Mommy talk a lot." "Who do you talk to here?" The innocent question hit James hard, forcing him to confront a truth he'd avoided for years. His luxurious penthouse was just a gilded prison where he'd isolated himself from any genuine human connection. That first night with Emma in the penthouse proved a challenge James could never have prepared for. At 2 a.m., he was woken by soft crying from the guest room. He found Emma curled up in the oversized king bed, trembling in the dark. "Emma, what's wrong?" "I had a bad dream," she sobbed. "I dreamed Mommy wasn't coming back, and Daddy came to take me away." James sat on the bed's edge, utterly lost on how to comfort a scared child. His fatherly instincts were buried under years of resentment and pain, rusted from disuse. "Your mom's gonna be okay, Emma. The doctors are taking good care of her. But what if she dies like Grandma? What if I'm all alone?" Tears streamed down her small face. "I don't want to go with Daddy. He yells a lot and smells bad." James felt a pang in his chest. Emma's mention of her father sparked a restless curiosity mixed with an instinctive protectiveness that surprised him. "How long's it been since you saw your dad?" "He left when I was 4. Mommy said he got sick and had to take care of himself far away. But sometimes he shows up and asks for money. When she doesn't give him any, he gets mad." James clenched his fists involuntarily. The image of a man intimidating Laura and Emma ignited a fury he hadn't felt in years. How could a father abandon such a sweet child and then dare to torment the family he'd left behind? "Want me to stay here till you fall asleep?" Emma nodded vigorously, and James found himself sitting on the floor by her bed, something he'd never imagined doing. As her breathing steadied, he reflected on her words. A father who yelled and smelled bad, clearly an alcoholic and violent. The next morning, during breakfast, James watched Emma eat with a voracious appetite, as if each meal might be her last. Margaret served the dishes with a cold efficiency that was starting to grate on him. "Margaret, can you treat Emma with a bit more warmth?" "Of course, Mr. Carter," she replied, her tone making it clear she disagreed with the entire situation. After Margaret left the room, Emma sighed softly. "Mister, why doesn't she like me?" James realized he couldn't lie to those innocent eyes. Some people need time to get used to changes. Mommy always said when people don't like you for no reason, it's because their heart hurts, Emma said, biting into her toast. Do you think her heart hurts? The child's simple wisdom left James speechless. Laura had taught her daughter to respond to hostility with compassion, a lesson he'd never learned himself. The phone rang, interrupting the moment. It was the hospital with news about Laura. James answered in Emma's presence, her small hand gripping his with anxiety. Mr. Carter, this is Dr. Thompson. Ms. Bennett is conscious and asking to see her daughter, but there's something else we need to discuss in person. Is it serious? I'd rather not discuss it over the phone. Can you come by today? James looked at Emma, her eyes fixed on him, trying to decipher the conversation. Can Emma see her mom for a few minutes? Yes. When James hung up, Emma was beaming. I get to see Mommy today? You sure do. James smiled, but a growing worry gnawed at him. What else had the doctor discovered about Laura's condition? And why did it require an in-person conversation? The drive to the hospital was filled with Emma's excited chatter as she planned what she'd tell her mom. James, however, felt a mounting dread, sensing his life was about to get even more complicated at the hospital. James watched the reunion between mother and daughter with a mix of relief and awe. Laura, despite her pallor and obvious frailty, lit up completely when Emma ran toward her. Their embrace was so full of genuine love that James felt almost intrusive witnessing such intimacy. Mommy, are you okay? I was so scared, Emma babbled, clinging to her mother's neck. I'm getting better, my princess. Where did you sleep last night? Laura glanced over Emma's head at James, her eyes reflecting deep gratitude mixed with embarrassment. I slept at Mr. James's house. Mommy, it's so big, with a movie star staircase and a huge bed. Emma gestured animatedly. He stayed with me when I had a nightmare and gave me yummy food. Laura closed her eyes for a moment, clearly moved. Mr. Carter, I don't know how to thank you. I never imagined. You don't need to thank me, James interrupted, surprised by the emotion in his own voice. Emma's an amazing kid. You must be so proud. After a few minutes, a nurse took Emma to see the hospital's playground, leaving James alone with Laura. She immediately tried to apologize, but James cut her off. Laura, focus on getting better. About your absences, I understand now. Tears streamed down her face. Sir, I was desperate. I couldn't lose my job, but I was too weak to leave the house. And Emma's still so little. Why didn't you come to me? Why not ask for help? Laura looked down, ashamed. You always seemed so distant, never showed interest in employees' lives. I thought if you knew about my problems, you'd fire me on the spot. Her brutal honesty hit James like a slap. She was right. He'd deliberately cultivated that cold, corporate image, keeping personal involvement at arm's length. Dr. Thompson arrived, interrupting the tense conversation. Mr. Carter, can we speak privately? In the doctor's office, the bombshell dropped. Ms. Bennett's situation is more complex than we initially thought. Beyond malnutrition and anemia, she has a chronic condition requiring long-term, expensive treatment. What kind of condition? Early-stage kidney issues, likely from years of stress, poor diet, and lack of preventive care. With proper treatment, she can live normally. Without it, the doctor let the sentence hang. James's stomach churned. How much is the treatment? Outside the public system, about $3,000 a month, plus regular tests and special medications. For James, $3,000 was less than he spent monthly on imported wines. For Laura, it was more than her entire salary. There's more, the doctor continued. During her intake, we learned she's been hiding symptoms for months, terrified of losing her job. She's fainted multiple times at home, always when Emma wasn't around. James clenched his fists. She could have died. Yes, if her daughter hadn't called you yesterday, we might not be having this conversation. Back in Laura's room, Emma was recounting stories about the penthouse, mimicking Margaret with a precision that made Laura smile despite her weakness. Mommy, why's Ms. Margaret mad at me? I didn't do anything wrong. Laura glanced at James, catching his attention. Sometimes people need time to get to know us better, Princess. James watched their interaction and made a decision that would change everything. He wouldn't just pay for Laura's treatment. He'd overhaul how he treated his employees. The calculated coldness that had been his trademark was costing real lives. Laura, he said, I want you to focus on getting well. Your job is secure, with a raise and full health benefits. And Emma can stay with me as long as needed. The shock on Laura's face was palpable. Sir, I can't accept charity. It's not charity, it's justice. In the second week of living with Emma, James began to believe he'd found a balance. The girl adapted to the penthouse routine, even winning over Susan with her natural politeness and genuine gratitude for every kind gesture. Margaret remained resistant but tolerated Emma with icy professionalism. James had turned one of his offices into a cozy temporary room for Emma, filled with toys he'd impulsively bought during a trip to a mall. Watching her play in the living room, where he once only held business meetings, brought a lightness to the penthouse he hadn't known was missing. That Thursday, while Emma drew at the kitchen table and James reviewed contracts on his laptop, the doorbell rang insistently. Margaret went to answer but returned minutes later, looking worried. Mr. Carter, there's a man at the door asking to speak about Laura's daughter. He says he's her father. James felt his blood run cold. Emma stopped drawing, her eyes widening with fear. She'd clearly recognized the voice echoing from the foyer. It's Daddy, she whispered, hiding behind James. Is he here to take me? James placed a protective hand on her shoulder. Stay here with Susan. I'll see what he wants. At the entrance, James met a disheveled man in wrinkled clothes, reeking unmistakably of alcohol. Michael Bennett, who'd taken Laura's last name when they married, was about 45 but looked much older due to obvious excesses. His bloodshot eyes scanned the penthouse with poorly disguised greed. So you're the rich guy playing dad to my kid, Michael said, slurring slightly. I'm James Carter, and you must be Michael, James replied, keeping his tone controlled but his stance clearly defensive. I'm here to get Emma. I heard Laura's in the hospital, and my daughter's living here. That ain't right, man. Kids belong with family. Family. James couldn't hide the scorn in his voice. You abandoned Laura and Emma 2 years ago. What kind of family is that? Michael laughed bitterly. Typical rich guy, huh? Think money fixes everything. I'm her real dad, and I've got rights. Rights you gave up when you walked out on her. Look here, you smug jerk. Michael stepped forward aggressively. I might have messed up before, but I'm changed. I quit drinking, got a job, and I want my daughter back. James saw through the lies easily. The alcoholic breath, trembling hands, evasive eyes. Michael was far from changed. Emma's well cared for here. Laura's recovering, and when she's out of the hospital, Laura can be sick all she wants, Michael interrupted cruelly. But Emma's coming with me today. That's not happening. Michael grinned menacingly. Think you can stop me? I'm her dad, man. I can call the cops, child services, the works. They'll back me up. James felt a controlled rage building. What do you really want, Michael? Because I know it's not Emma's well-being. Michael's smile widened, revealing yellowed teeth. Smart guy, huh? Look, I won't lie. Kids are work, and work costs money. But if someone wanted to help out with a monthly sum to keep her in a stable environment, I could consider leaving things as they are. Extortion. James recognized the thinly veiled blackmail instantly. Michael didn't want Emma back. He wanted to turn her into a cash cow. How much? $5,000 a month would be a good start to show your good faith. James clenched his fists, fighting the urge to physically throw Michael out. But he knew he had to play this smart. A man like Michael wouldn't give up easily and could use the legal system against him. I need to think about it, James said. You've got till tomorrow, Michael replied, already heading toward the gate. Or I'm back with child services to get my kid, and you won't be able to do a thing. When Michael disappeared down the street, James stood frozen in the foyer, processing the real threat looming over Emma. For her sake, He'd need to find a way to protect her legally from a father who saw her only as a commodity. The next morning, James woke with a steely determination he hadn't felt in years. After a sleepless night researching custody and child protection laws, he'd devised a plan. First, he'd consult his lawyers. Second, he'd talk to Laura about the situation. Third, he'd document everything possible about Michael's unfit behavior. Emma sensed his focus during breakfast. The girl, who'd become surprisingly attuned to the moods of the adults around her, played quietly as James spoke with his law firm on the phone. "Dr. Lawson, I need you here today. It's urgent and involves child custody issues." When he hung up, Emma approached hesitantly. "Mister, is Daddy going to take me away?" James crouched to her level, choosing his words carefully. "I won't let anything bad happen to you, Emma. I promise. But he's my real dad. Mommy always said parents have special rights." The innocence of her remark broke James's heart. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that some parents don't deserve the rights biology grants them? Dr. Lawson arrived 2 hours later, a 62-year-old with vast family law experience. His expression grew grave as James recounted the past day's events. "James, this is tricky. Legally, the biological father has preferential rights, especially if he can prove he's trying to rehabilitate. But he's clearly trying to extort money. That needs to be proven. Even if we do, he could still claim custody, arguing he's changed and wants to rebuild his relationship with his daughter." James felt frustration rising. Emma's terrified of him. Her wishes should matter. They do, but she's only 6. Courts often prioritize family reunification, even in questionable cases. At that moment, Margaret entered the room, looking unusually agitated. "Mr. Carter, there's a woman at the door. She says she's a social worker and needs to talk about Emma." James and Dr. Lawson exchanged worried glances. Michael had acted on his threat faster than expected. The social worker, Dr. Patricia Evans, was a middle-aged woman with a stern demeanor and a clipboard always in hand. She surveyed the penthouse with critical eyes, clearly suspicious of the irregular situation. "Mr. Carter, I received a report that a minor is living here without proper legal authorization. The child's father claims she was brought here without his consent. Emma's mother was hospitalized. The girl had nowhere else to go. I understand the good intentions, but there are protocols, shelters, registered foster families." Patricia checked her notes. "The father is requesting immediate custody. The father who abandoned her 2 years ago? People can change, Mr. Carter. He claims he's sober and employed." James realized he was losing ground. "Can I speak with Emma before any decisions are made?" The social worker agreed, but her body language suggested she'd already formed a preliminary judgment. When Emma was called, she hid behind James, clearly terrified. "Ma'am, I don't want to go. Please don't make me." Dr. Evans observed their interaction with professional scrutiny. "Emma, your daddy wants you to live with him. Do you remember him? He yelled at Mommy and broke stuff when he drank that bad-smelling stuff." Emma whispered. "That was a long time ago, sweetie. People can change." James felt a powerless fury at the institutional blindness. "Dr. Evans, with all due respect, Emma's clearly traumatized by her father. Forcing her to go back to him would be cruel. Mr. Carter, I understand your concern, but I can't base legal decisions on a child's fears that might stem from parental alienation." The implicit accusation that James was manipulating Emma against her father was the final straw. At that moment, he realized he'd need to fight with every tool at his disposal to protect the girl who, without him noticing, had become the most important thing in his life. After the social worker's unsettling visit, James found himself in uncharted emotional territory. That night, as Emma slept in the room he'd carefully prepared for her, he stayed awake, confronting a truth that scared him. He'd grown attached to this child in a way he hadn't felt in decades. The realization forced him to relive painful, buried memories. His own son, Noah, now 17, and living with his ex-wife in California. A bitter divorce had severed their bond with surgical precision, turning James from an involved father into an occasional visitor, then a complete stranger. How could you drift so far from your own son, yet grow so attached to an employee's daughter? He questioned himself quietly, watching Emma sleep peacefully. The answer came with brutal clarity. Noah had consciously rejected him, influenced by a resentful mother's manipulations. Emma, in contrast, had naturally chosen him, seeing in him genuine protection and care. The next morning, James decided to visit Laura in the hospital with a proposal that had been forming in his mind. He found her looking much better, but worried about Emma's stories of her ex-husband's visit. "Mr. Carter, I don't know what to do," Laura confessed, tears streaming down her face. "Michael never wanted to be a father when he was with us, and now he's back out of nowhere, demanding rights." "Laura, I need to be honest about something," James said, choosing his words carefully. "These past days caring for Emma have shown me a part of myself I didn't know existed. She's awakened a fatherly instinct I thought I'd lost forever." Laura watched him closely, sensing the emotional depth behind his words. "What are you saying?" "I want to help you both permanently, not just financially. I want to be a constant presence in Emma's life, to protect her, educate her, be there for every milestone." "Sir, call me James, please. We're family now." Laura closed her eyes, processing the extraordinary offer. "James, are you sure? Raising a child is a huge responsibility, especially one who's not biologically yours. I'm more certain of this than any business decision I've ever made," James said, sitting on the edge of her hospital bed. "Laura, I want to adopt Emma officially. With your permission, of course." The shock on Laura's face was total. Adoption? But that would mean... It would mean full legal protection from Michael. It would mean quality education, healthcare, safety, and most importantly, it would mean she'd have a father who truly loves her. Laura began to cry, but they weren't tears of sadness. "Emma talks about you all the time, calls you Mr. James with a warmth I've never seen her show for Michael. And I love her like she's my own daughter," James admitted aloud for the first time. "When I think of losing her to that man, it physically hurts." At that moment, Dr. Thompson entered for a routine check, but paused, sensing the conversation's emotional weight. "Sorry to interrupt. Should I come back?" "Actually, doctor," James said, "maybe you can help. Medically, what's your opinion on placing Emma in Michael Bennett's care?" Dr. Thompson frowned. "Based on the child's behavior and family history reports, I'd say it would be highly detrimental to her emotional development. Could you document that officially?" "Absolutely. The child's well-being must always come first." Laura took James's hand, her decision clear. "If you're sure you want this, James, I consent to the adoption. Emma deserves a real father, not someone who sees her as a cash grab." James felt a wave of relief and gratitude that left him momentarily speechless. For the first time in years, he was building something based purely on love, not profit or convenience. The decision to adopt Emma triggered a chain of events that tested James's resolve in ways he'd never anticipated. The legal process was a bureaucratic maze of forms, psychological evaluations, home visits, and, most challenging, Michael Bennett's active resistance. In the penthouse, reactions varied and were revealing. Surprisingly, Margaret was the first to offer support, confessing privately that she'd grown fond of Emma despite her initial reluctance. "Mr. James," she said while folding Emma's clothes, "it took me a while, but I see now that the little ones brought life to this house. I haven't heard laughter echo in these halls in years." Susan, however, expressed genuine concern about practical implications. "Sir, raising a child will completely change your routine. Are you sure you're ready to give up the freedom you've always had?" The question made James reflect deeply. His life had been built around total autonomy, making decisions without considering anyone but himself. Now, every choice would involve Emma's well-being. "Susan," he replied, watching Emma play in the garden, I never knew what freedom really meant until I had someone worth giving it up for. The adoption process hit its first major hurdle when Michael, backed by a shady lawyer, formally contested the petition. His strategy was dirty but legally sound. He claimed James was buying a child, using his wealth to tear apart a family. Dr. Lawson arrived at the penthouse on a rainy afternoon with discouraging news. James, Michael's playing hardball. He secured a temporary injunction, halting the adoption until it's proven he's an unfit parent. How do we prove that? We need concrete evidence of neglect, abuse, or unfitness. Witnesses, medical records, criminal history. James felt frustration mounting. The man's clearly an alcoholic and tried to extort me. I know, but we need documented proof, not just our word against his. That night, as he helped Emma with a drawing activity, James noticed her serious focus as she colored carefully within the lines, an impressive discipline for a 6-year-old. "Mr. James," she said without looking up, "why does Daddy want me to live with him if he never played with me when I was little?" The innocent question cut James deeply. "Sometimes people do things for reasons that aren't about love, Emma. But you do things for love?" James stopped breathing for a moment. "Yes, I do. Everything I do for you is because of love." Emma finally looked up, her big brown eyes shining with trust that both broke and healed James's heart. "Then you're my real dad, even if you're not the daddy who made me in mommy's tummy." The simplicity of her childish logic revealed a truth James had been grappling to understand for weeks. Fatherhood wasn't about biology, but a daily choice to love, protect, and nurture. His phone rang, an unknown number heightening his apprehension. "James Carter." "Yes. This is Patricia Mora from Child Protective Services. I'm informing you that a hearing has been scheduled for next week. Michael Bennett is seeking immediate custody of Emma, claiming you're holding her illegally." James clenched his fists, watching Emma draw, oblivious to the legal storm brewing around her. The battle for the girl who'd become the center of his world was just beginning. "I'll be there," he said, his voice thick with a determination that surprised even himself. The days leading up to the hearing became a whirlwind of legal preparation and emotional tension. James hired the best family law attorneys, private investigators to document Michael's history, and even a child psychologist to assess Emma's emotional state. The girl, sensing the adult's anxiety, grew quieter and more introspective. James found her awake several nights, staring out the window, as if expecting Michael to appear from the shadows. "Mr. James," she said one morning over breakfast, a ritual he'd come to value above any business meeting. "If I have to live with Daddy, will you forget me?" The question pierced James's heart like a blade. "Emma, that'll never happen. I could never forget you. But what if the judge says so? Mommy always said we have to follow the law." James crouched to her level, holding her small hands. "Listen, princess, no matter what happens, you'll always be my daughter in my heart, and I'll fight to my last breath to keep you safe." Investigations into Michael revealed a darker history than James had imagined. Multiple arrests for public intoxication, 2 jobs lost due to excessive absences, and witnesses confirming domestic violence during his marriage to Laura. But Michael's lawyer was cunning, presenting forged documents showing he attended AA meetings and had a stable construction job, carefully crafted to sway the court. 3 days before the hearing, James received a call that changed everything. "Mr. Carter, this is the 12th precinct. Michael Bennett was arrested last night for public assault and disorderly conduct. He was heavily intoxicated and repeatedly mentioned taking his daughter back from the rich guy." James felt a mix of relief and concern. Is he still in custody? He'll be held at least until his custody hearing on Monday. When James shared the news with Dr. Lawson, the lawyer finally flashed a confident smile. "This changes everything, James. A father arrested for drunkenness and making threatening remarks about retrieving his daughter doesn't inspire judicial confidence." The day before the hearing, Laura was discharged from the hospital. James brought her to his penthouse, where she teared up seeing how Emma had settled in. The girl's room was filled with drawings, toys, and Polaroid photos James had taken over the weeks. "My God," Laura whispered, looking at a photo of Emma and James making pancakes, both dusted with flour and laughing. "Look how happy she is." "Laura, whatever happens tomorrow, know that I love Emma like a daughter, and you'll always be welcome here." That night, the three women in James's home, Laura, Emma, and Margaret, prepared a special dinner together. Watching them interact in the kitchen, James realized he'd unintentionally created an unconventional but genuinely loving family. Emma insisted on sleeping in James's room, saying she wanted to be sure he'd be there when she woke. Lying in his king-size bed with a 6-year-old curled up beside him, James reflected on the extraordinary journey that began with a single desperate phone call. "Mr. James," Emma murmured sleepily. "Will everything be okay tomorrow?" "It'll be okay," he replied, kissing her forehead. "No matter what, we'll find a way to stay together." As Emma drifted off, James stayed awake, mentally preparing for the most important fight of his life. Not for money, contracts, or power, but for the right to remain a father to the girl who'd turned his heart of stone into one capable of unconditional love. The family court was thick with tension when James arrived with Dr. Lawson and his legal team. Laura held Emma's hand tightly, the girl dressed in a blue dress James had bought for the occasion. Emma was visibly nervous, her big eyes constantly seeking James as her anchor. Michael appeared in handcuffs, brought straight from the precinct. His bloodshot eyes and unshaven face contrasted sharply with the borrowed suit his lawyer had provided. When he saw Emma, his face twisted into an expression James couldn't read: genuine paternal love or mere possessiveness. Judge Marcia Reynolds, a 55-year-old known for her strictness in cases involving minors, reviewed the documents meticulously before starting the hearing. "This is a complex case regarding the custody of Emma Bennett, age 6, she declared. "On one side, we have the biological father, Michael Bennett, claiming parental rights. On the other, James Carter, seeking adoption with the consent of the biological mother, Laura Bennett." Michael testified first. His lawyer had coached him well, but his recent arrest undermined any credibility. "Your Honor," Michael said, trying to sound sober, "I admit I made mistakes, but I'm a changed man. I've quit drinking, got a steady job, and want to make up for lost time with my daughter." "Mr. Bennett," the judge interrupted, reviewing the file, "you were arrested 3 days ago for intoxication and assault. How do you reconcile that with your claim of sobriety?" Michael stammered, caught off guard. It was a moment of weakness, Your Honor. The stress of my daughter being raised by a stranger pushed me to slip. A stranger who, per reports, has provided education, healthcare, and emotional stability for the child." James watched Michael squirm, sensing his strategy crumbling under judicial scrutiny. When it was his turn to testify, James spoke with a sincerity that surprised even himself. "Your Honor, 3 weeks ago, I was a different man, cold, focused only on business, incapable of genuine emotional connections." His voice wavered slightly. "Emma changed that. She taught me what it means to be a father, not biologically, but in the deepest sense. And are you prepared for the responsibilities that entails?" "I am, Your Honor, more prepared than I've ever been for anything in my life." The most poignant moment came when Emma was called to speak privately with the judge. James watched anxiously through the office window as the girl answered questions with touching seriousness. When they returned, the judge's expression had visibly softened. Emma said something very interesting. Judge Reynolds announced, "I asked who she feels safest with. She said, 'With Mr. James, because he chose me, not because he had to.'" Michael tried to protest, but the judge silenced him with a gesture. "More importantly," she continued, "when I asked what she wants most in the world, she said, 'For my mommy to get better and for Mr. James to keep being my dad, because he makes me feel special every day.'" James felt tears stream down his face, a rarity for decades. The judge stood, her decision clear. Considering all factors, the biological father's history of abandonment and instability, the child's exemplary adjustment to the petitioner's home, and, above all, the child's emotional well-being, I grant the adoption petition. The gavel's bang echoed like celestial music. Emma ran into James's arms, and he held her as if shielding her from every harm in the world. "Daddy," she whispered for the first time. "You're my real dad now. I always was princess. Now it's just official." 3 weeks after the ruling, life in James's penthouse had transformed entirely. What was once a silent mausoleum of luxury was now a vibrant home filled with laughter, conversation, and the infectious energy of a happy child. Emma raced through the halls, her footsteps echoing, turning every room into a stage for her imaginative play. James made sweeping changes, not just in his personal life, but in his company. He launched an employee assistance program offering full health care, educational support for workers' children, and psychological counseling when needed. Laura was promoted to general supervisor with a fair salary and the assurance she'd never need to hide struggles for fear of losing her job. "Mr. James," Laura said one afternoon while tidying scattered toys in the living room, "sometimes I still can't believe how everything's changed." "It feels like a dream to me too," James replied, watching Emma build a colorful block castle on the Persian rug, now shared with educational toys. "But it's a dream I never want to wake from." The adjustment wasn't without challenges. James had to learn patiently about bedtime routines, balanced diets, occasional tantrums, and the thousand small needs of a growing child. Margaret and Susan became his informal teachers, showing him how to bandage scraped knees, tell bedtime stories, and set limits with love. "Daddy," Emma said one morning over breakfast, a ritual James now cherished above any boardroom meeting. "Why'd you look sad yesterday when I called my doll my daughter?" James paused, coffee cup halfway to his mouth. The question touched a still healing wound. His son, Noah, whom he'd grown distant from after a traumatic divorce. "Because it reminded me of another kid I should have loved better," he answered honestly, surprising himself. "Can you call him?" Emma's simple suggestion revealed a wisdom James had lost in his adult bitterness. That afternoon, for the first time in 5 years, he dialed Noah's number. "Hello, Noah. It's Dad." The silence on the other end stretched endlessly before Noah replied, his teenage voice laced with surprise and lingering hurt. "Dad, why were you calling?" "Because I made the biggest mistake of my life drifting away from you, and I've learned it's never too late to fix what's broken." The conversation was tough, full of awkward pauses and bottled-up emotions, but it ended with Noah agreeing to visit during school break. James hung up with a heart both broken and hopeful. Emma, who'd watched the call with a child's sharp intuition, took his hand. "He'll like me, Daddy. He'll love you as much as I do," James replied, realizing Emma was already helping heal wounds he didn't know still bled. That night, as he tucked Emma into bed, James reflected on the extraordinary journey that began with that desperate call weeks ago. A frightened child had saved 2 lives, hers and his. "Daddy," Emma murmured sleepily, "can we make pancakes again tomorrow?" "We can make pancakes every day if you want, Princess. And you'll be here when I wake up. Always?" James promised, kissing her forehead. Always and forever. As Emma drifted off, James sat by her bed, watching the child who'd utterly transformed his understanding of love, family, and the true meaning of wealth. For the first time in decades, James Carter was truly at peace with himself. 5 weeks had passed since that life-changing phone call. The James Carter who now made breakfast in the sunlit kitchen was unrecognizable compared to the cold man who'd once dialed Laura Bennett's number to fire her. "Daddy, you burned the toast again," Emma giggled, pointing at the dark slices popping from the toaster. At 6, she'd become the household's official food critic, always kind but honest. I'm getting better, James defended, scraping off the char. Remember the first time I tried eggs? They were like rubber. And I ate them anyway 'cause I didn't want you to be sad, Emma confessed, sparking a genuine laugh from James. Laura walked in, wearing her new supervisor's uniform, her eyes glowing with a joy that went beyond professional success. Seeing her daughter interact with James as if they'd always been family moved her daily. "Morning, family," she said, kissing Emma's forehead and smiling at James with wordless gratitude. Margaret appeared minutes later with the morning mail. Among the usual business letters was a colorful envelope addressed to Emma Carter, her first official document with her new full name. "It's my school birthday party invite," Emma squealed, tearing it open excitedly. "Can I go, Daddy?" "Of course you can. We'll pick out a beautiful gift for your friend." Watching Emma read the invite with effort but admirable determination, James felt a surge of paternal pride. In recent weeks, he'd enrolled her in a private school where she was thriving academically, making friends, and discovering talents she'd never had the chance to explore. "Daddy," Emma said suddenly, "can I ask you something important?" "Always." "Do you regret answering the phone that day?" The question hit James with unexpected emotional weight. He looked around the kitchen, once just a functional space, now filled with Emma's drawings taped to the fridge, Polaroid photos of special moments on the cabinets, and the organized chaos of a real family living a real life. "Emma," he said, crouching to her level, "that phone call was the most important moment of my entire life because it's when I discovered I had a heart big enough to love an amazing daughter like you. And I discovered I had a daddy who chose me just because he loved me," Emma replied, hugging him with all the strength in her little arms. At that moment, the phone rang. James and Emma exchanged glances and laughed together. Now, phone calls were no longer a source of anxiety, but chances to share the happiness they'd found. It was Noah, confirming his weekend visit. The teenager's voice carried a hopeful shyness that made James's heart race. "Dad, can I meet my little sister? She's dying to meet her big brother," James replied, watching Emma do a happy dance hearing the conversation. After hanging up, James scooped Emma into his arms and walked to the balcony overlooking the garden where she played every afternoon. The penthouse, once a symbol of gilded solitude, now echoed with laughter, chatter, and the wonderful sound of a family built not by blood but by the conscious choice to love. "Wise girl, princess," James said. "Sometimes the scariest calls in our lives lead to the most beautiful miracles." Emma smiled, snuggling into his arms. "Like when I answered the phone and you came to save me?" "No, my love. Like when you answered the phone and saved me."